The door to voter registration has effectively been shut. That's according to the South African Institute for Race Relations. It was responding to the Cooperative Governance Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's proclamation that local government elections will go ahead on the 27th of October. The Independent Electoral Commission will meanwhile ask the Constitutional Court to postpone the election. SAIRR Analyst Gabriel Crouse speaks to us now about that particular concern of theirs. So, Mr. Crouse, thank you so much for joining me. So, you are concerned about, before we even get to the door of voter registration being shut, you actually believe that the minister acted ultra vires beyond her powers. She doesn't have the powers, as far as you are concerned, to even be proclaiming an election date. Expand a bit more on that.
Thank you so much. So the minister certainly has the power to proclaim the election. The question is, did she do her duty in proclaiming it earlier this week? And there the answer is clearly no. The Constitution and the law requires for national and provincial elections that the proclamation is made before the term expires. But for municipal elections, it says explicitly that you can make the proclamation after the term expires. So that's the first fact. The second fact is the minister said she had to proclaim so that the IEC could go to court. That is not true. You can tell by looking at the IEC's court application. We've read those papers, and nowhere does it say that it needed the minister to make such a proclamation. In fact, it says its problem comes out of the fact that the window is defined by the Constitution, and its own report finds that it can't have the election in that window. So that's the reason it's going to court. The minister didn't need to proclaim. The third factor that's very important is that the IEC said in the Moseneke report that it could do this thing at least within 82 days between proclamation and election. So that means if they put the election to the end, the proclamation could have been made next week. If they could truncate the process further, the proclamation could have been made even later, at a point where the court could have already made a ruling, at a point where registrations could have already taken place. The IEC minister made the proclamation early, before the in-person registration could take place, despite the fact that South Africans had been promised that they would get a chance to have in-person voter registration. And if we just look at the numbers from previous municipal elections, that in-person registration, usually there's hundreds of thousands of people who get a chance to go and register to vote. Youngsters, people who didn't register before, people who've moved. This time, people were denied that opportunity, denying them the vote, denying them the franchise. And as I said, there's no good reason for her to have done that early, before the voter registration weekend was done. And therefore, we find that her act is surely illegal and unconstitutional, and it violates the very first chapter of the Constitution, which says there shall be universal franchise, there shall be a common voters' roll, and there shall be regular elections. In other words, everyone who wants to vote shall have the right to vote. But people have been denied that right by the minister, and so we want to challenge her on that basis.
What does challenge her entail? You've used some pretty strong language, I mean, illegal and unconstitutional, in the context of someone who, is clothed in constitutional powers. That's pretty serious. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, it couldn't be more serious. So we've been chatting with our attorneys, we've been chatting with counsel, and we are looking to enjoin at the Constitutional Court case that's being brought by the IEC to say not only that the IEC's report makes an error of judgment and that elections can in fact be held in a free and fair fashion, but also to say that the minister's actions in this case have been unconstitutional and therefore must be rescinded. And in this regard, we're encouraged by the IEC's court application, because they themselves say we call for the court to rescind, to overturn this proclamation.
Yeah, I suspect that maybe as far as agreements between the two of you will go. And I do expect that there'll be plenty you won't agree about. But you make another interesting point. In your reading, the Moseneke report and panel makes an error of judgment. You are saying elections can go ahead. I understand the arguments around, how you could tweak election day itself. But as you and I know, the freeness and fairness of elections is measured in terms of the period building up to election day and beyond election day. How would you go around, Mr. Crouse, around this question of the restrictions that are in place right now? How would I, as a candidate wanting to campaign, how would I be able to go door-to-door knocking in rural Ngutu to talk to my neighbors who are wary of COVID-19 and have these restrictions?
Well, you and I are journalists, and we know many of our colleagues go door to door to go and ask people questions in hot environments, sometimes in cool environments in rural areas, to ask them what's going on, why are people frustrated, what's happening with service delivery, what's happening with the looting and so on. And what do journalists do when they're going door to door? They put a mask on, they wash their hands, they maintain a proper social distance, and yet they still have that personal interaction, they still have that face-to-face opportunity to hear what are people's grievances. Politicians must do the same, with the addition of then saying how are they going to make things better. We believe that door-to-door campaigning is one of the easiest things to do in this regard. The bigger challenge is in terms of large rallies, and when you're trying to have them indoors especially, then that is going to be a problem. The important fact is that the rules must be applied evenly so as not to discriminate against any particular party, and there we just want to follow what the regulations are for everyone else, for churches, for mosques, for synagogues, for entertainment industry, and so on and so forth. These are very important parts of our culture and of our country, as is the grocery stores where we all need to go to get food, as are the social grants queues where we need to go and get money that we depend on to survive. In all of those environments, government has found a way to regulate in order to find a balance, in order to make sure that people can act freely and fairly and safely. And that's exactly the same rules that must be applied to political parties.
I'm out of time, Mr. Crouse. Quickly, talk to me about election day itself. You are saying that this proclamation of this one particular day closes the door for other possible solutions, which could have been, in your words, a staggering of the elections over a number of days. You do realize, though, the challenges that would bring, right? Because now, in terms of that freeness and fairness, you now have to be vigilant as the IEC over 3 days, with many, many problems cropping up, with the result that perhaps the election could end up being challenged on the grounds of those irregularities that, you know, arise overnight as ballot boxes are left somewhere in Nkosazana in Mpumalanga.
Yes, indeed. And the IEC has faced such challenges even when there was just one election day. It's our view that turning it from 1 day to 2 or 3 days is not going to increase those challenges. Securing ballot boxes and making sure that they're not stolen and that the labels don't get swapped around is something that the IEC must do anyway. It's a problem that they didn't do it last time. It's a problem Afrobarometer finds only 30% of their respondents trust the IEC. But we can't forestall the Constitution. We can't break the explicit constitutional order signed into law by Mandela in 1998 to have regular elections on the basis of the fact that the IEC doesn't know how to always guard its ballot boxes on 1 day or 2 days or 3 days. And we see in Africa, countries have staggered this thing across the world, they've staggered this thing, and it's been fine.
All right, I've got to leave it there. Thank you for your time there. That's SAIRR's Gabriel Crouse there, weighing in on the concerns that they have about the proclamation by the Minister of Cooperative Governance of the 27th of October as election day until a competent court says otherwise.